The eye is a marvelous instrument, a window through which we explore the world. But there is a great deal that the eye cannot see. We have invented instruments which aid our eyes as we explore the world around us. Powerful telescopes and cameras can see into the far reaches of space, revealing the wonders of the universe. Microscopes coupled to cameras allow our eyes to see and record another universe, the realm of the very small. A universe of very tiny living things. Photography permits us to speed up or slow down the world around us, so events which may take hours seem to happen in just a few seconds. And events which happen too fast for us to see with our eyes can be slowed down. By slowing down or speeding up everyday events, we can learn how they take place. We can better understand the world in which we live. Even with its limitations, the eye reveals much about our world. We can see many different life forms. In the animal world alone, a great variety of creatures of many sizes and shapes. Rhinoceros, huge lumbering beasts of the African grasslands. Ducks, not very large at all, but found almost everywhere on Earth. Zebras, with their uniquely striped patterns of hair. Elephants, the largest animals found on land. Giraffes, the tallest and among the most graceful creatures on our planet. Whales, the mysterious giants of the Earth's oceans, share their home with small organisms, plankton, one of the most important parts of the food chain. In water, both fresh and salt, we can discover a remarkable universe of living things. On a journey of exploration in a freshwater pond, we can find a variety of life forms, from freshwater plants to fish. But what else is there? Let's take a closer look at a sample of pond water, using a magnifying glass to help our eyes. We can see thousands of tiny specks. They are called protists, one-celled organisms. Here we compare the protists, the white specks in the water, to the size of the eye of a needle. This journey of exploration begins with the aid of a microscope. A slide has been placed under the microscope containing a drop of water alive with protists. A needle is placed on the slide. You can see that even the largest protists move easily through the eye of the needle. To us, this is a very tiny space. To a protist, it is vast. Protists are so small that a single small drop of water may contain thousands. Yet these incredibly small organisms, much smaller than the eye of a needle and consisting of only a single cell, perform all of the basic life functions as the larger plants and animals do. Protists differ from each other in many ways. Size and shape are easy differences to see, but in those protists that move, the type of structures used for movement are important in identifying them. Blepharisma moves by means of tiny hair-like structures called cilia. Scientists call this kind of protist a ciliate. Paramecium is a common ciliate. The cilia are extremely small and hair-like, lined up in rows like the oars of a boat, and are used to move the organism around. Some protists have a long whip-like structure called a flagellum. In this case, the tip vibrates rapidly, moving the organism. As you might expect, these protists are called flagellates. Amoeba are very common protists that appear to move by changing their shape and flowing in the direction they want to go. The extensions of their body are structures called pseudopods, or false feet. As it moves, the amoeba is always ready to capture food. All protists, like plants or animals, either make their own food or feed on others. Watch what happens to this smaller protist that swims in between two of the amoeba's false feet. The amoeba slowly flows around to enclose it and forms a structure called a food vacuole, where it is digested. A type of amoeba called diphlugia has a hard shell to protect it, and only the false feet extend out of the shell as diphlugia moves about. Another specialized structure in some of the protists, called a contractile vacuole, serves an important function. Excess water entering the protist is collected in the vacuole and is pushed out through a tiny pore in the cell which forms when the vacuole contracts. Protists, like other cells, have a nucleus, and in some cases more than one. The nucleus contains the chromatin, special types of molecules that are passed when the cell divides. Protists reproduce in a number of ways. Most cells just divide to form two, while others reproduce sexually. Conjugation is a special type of sexual reproduction. In cell division, a single protist divides to become two. Eventually, the two new protists will reproduce, and so on. Some form large colonies or groups of cells. Through photosynthesis, just like the trees of the forest and the grasses of the prairies, Volvox uses the energy of the sun in the production of its own food from nutrients in the water. Diatoms are a unique kind of protist, microscopic golden jewels with unique body forms living in both fresh and salt water. After they die, their hard skeletons sink to the sea floor or are washed up on beaches where we can collect them for study. They may also be buried and, under great pressure, form diatomaceous earth, which is used to filter impurities out of water and other liquids. Some protists have very close relationships with other kinds of protists. This is Paramecium bursaria. Living within it are other smaller protists called chlorella, which carry on photosynthesis and give the paramecium its green color. The partnership benefits both protists, one receiving nutrients while the other has a nice place to stay. When Paramecium bursaria dies, it bursts. The chlorella, green with chlorophyll, are released and their forms are clearly seen. With the aid of the microscope and camera, we have seen the many shapes, sizes, and colors of protists, as well as the way they move. Their numbers in a single drop of water were more than we could count. Can you imagine how many there must be in a pond? Although most protists live freely in water, some live within other organisms. The soil that covers the continents of our planet is the home of many life forms, including earthworms, which in turn are home for protists. These organisms live in the reproductive parts of the earthworm. The protist does no harm to the worm and has a safe place to live. Cows are commonplace in our world, the source of important foods for humans, meat and milk. Cows eat grass, but they cannot completely digest it without help. Once again, protists are hard at work. Protists living in the cow's stomach help produce digestive chemicals which break down grass fibers. Without these organisms, cows, one of our major protein sources, could not survive. Not all protists are beneficial to humans and to other organisms. One of the most deadly is a tiny flagellate called trypanosoma, found in the bloodstream. It causes diseases which afflict millions of people in Africa and South America. Perhaps one day scientists will discover cures for the terrible diseases brought on by these tiny organisms. Although brief, our journey, with the aid of the microscope, has taken us into a world unknown to our eyes, the world of the protists, an important part of the great web of life on our planet.